Hey everyone! So I chose to do the film Loving, which was directed by Jeff Nichols, and this is a true story about Mildred and Richard Loving and the Loving versus Virginia case. The movie Loving versus Virginia is a film about Mildred and Richard Loving, who were an interracial couple whose 1958 marriage in Virginia violated the state law, leading to their arrest. This case eventually became a landmark civil rights case that went to the Supreme Court. Mildred and Richard went to Washington, D.C. in 1958 to get married and came back to Virginia. One night, they were awoken by a police officer breaking down their door and screaming at them. The police officer asked what they were doing together. Mildred stated that she was Richard's wife and that Richard pointed to the marriage license that was on their wall, and the police officer said that was no good, and they ended up in jail. After being arrested, Richard and Mildred pleaded guilty to going up to Washington, D.C., getting married, and coming back to Virginia, which was against the law. Another thing they had to do was leave Virginia for 25 years. Or if they decided to stay in Virginia, they would end up in prison for 1 year. They ended up going to Washington, D.C. They had children, they had a life, but then Mildred was sad and depressed and wanted to have her children be out in the country and running around and not being out in the city. She reached out to Bobby Kennedy, who was the Attorney General at the time in the United States in 1960, and he was not able to take her case. But he ended up forwarding it to the American Civil Liberties Union, and they were able to take Mildred and Richard's case. And they were talking to them and saying that the first thing they should do to go back to Virginia is when they go back to Virginia is they would get arrested. And they didn't like that idea. So they didn't want to do it. And then Mildred decided, I'm tired of it. I want to live back in Virginia. I don't care what they do. And they ended up going back there. And this is how it started with them becoming, getting into the whole fact of it turning into a case, getting arrested, and then eventually moving to the Supreme Court. There were a lot of ethical dilemmas that I found in this movie. The two main ones I'm going to be talking about are deontology and personal autonomy versus social coercion. As well as you can see, I saw virtue ethics and fundamental rights, but I'm mainly going to work on talking about deontology as well as personal autonomy versus social coercion. So how does deontology connect to an ethical dilemma in the movie? Well, deontology is the moral philosophy based on rules and duties. The morally right decision for Richard and Mildred was to leave Virginia at the time. But after speaking with the lawyer from the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, as well as Mildred wanting to raise her children in the country, they returned back to Virginia. They did return to Virginia and lived there for a while. And then Mildred decided to use the media as a means, in a good way, to tell her and Richard's story, to make sure that people knew what was going on and let people know they weren't alone and that they were willing to fight for what they thought was morally right, what they believed was supposed to be you do the right thing no matter how hard it takes, no matter what you do, no matter what the answers are, you figure it out. Um, Also, the Virginia court had a universal moral duty to respect Mildred's and Richard's fundamental rights to be married and reject racial discrimination. How does personal autonomy versus social coercion fit into the ethical dilemma of this movie? So, in my opinion, personal autonomy is about people who have their own views, beliefs, values, all these types of things, and nobody is able to get involved. Nobody should be interfering with that, affecting it. That can't be the government, your family, your friends, etc. So, how does personal autonomy show up? Richard and Mildred's resilience that they faced as they asserted their right to marriage and to love one another is a big part of it. The freedom to love whoever, regardless of social barriers or laws. Richard and Mildred just wanted to be happy and be free, and they wanted to live their life. They weren't bothering anybody, they just wanted to be left alone. And they even said they wanted to be left alone. And again, in my opinion, they weren't doing anything wrong. And they faced a choice to either stay together in Virginia and go to prison or leave together and not return to Virginia for 25 years. The state tried using coercion, the state of Virginia tried using coercion power to deny them of their fundamental rights to be married. And also the state of Virginia decided to use social coercion as a social contract for racial purity, which is talking about mixing of the races and how that is not okay. And just the fact that they loved each other and they wanted to be together. They fought for what they thought was right and what they truly believed in, and they just wanted to be with each other, and they felt like they could get through anything as long as they had one another. In summary, this movie is so wonderful and amazing, and I would definitely suggest anyone who wants to watch it, because it talks about the history that we have in this country and all of the fights that people have fought for many years, for centuries, even what people are fighting for now with their fundamental rights, for their fundamental right to be married to whoever they want to be, especially when it comes to gay marriage, especially when it comes to trans rights, LGBTQ plus rights, anybody's rights. This also, the Supreme Court in this case stated that marriage is a fundamental right, and Loving versus Virginia made the prohibition of marriage based on race unconstitutional, which is wonderful. So I definitely would recommend this video to anybody, and just know that it's very intense in a lot of ways on an emotional level, but I know that, it's good too, and it shows a lot of it's sad, but it also ends up in a wonderful way, which not all of these cases do. These are my references. Thank you very much for listening.